Hello, I'm Annette Young and welcome to the 51%, a show about women reshaping our world. Coming up, a first for the Arab world and Tunisia, with the country now having its first female Prime Minister. This as a record number of women are running as candidates in Iraq's upcoming parliamentary elections. And when it comes to abortion rights, how does France compare to the rest of the world? I'll be talking shortly to Marianne Niosi from French Family Planning. But first, Tunisian President Kais Saied has named a little-known geologist as the country's first woman Prime Minister and the first ever in the Arab world. Najla Bodan-Ramdan will take office at a time of national crisis, with the democratic gains won in a 2011 revolution now in doubt, and also as a major threat looms over public finances. The Tunisian president having suspended parliament while assuming wide executive powers back in July. In the meantime, millions of Iraqis are set to vote in parliamentary elections on October the 10th, with almost 30% of candidates being women, a record number. Many of them face intimidation and discrimination, but that's not stopping them, as Wasim Cornet reports.
It's election season in Iraq, and this year Iraqis will have an unprecedented number of women to choose from as they vote for the country's next National Assembly.
كثير تنافس، 13 امرأة تتنافس على الكرسي.
On this day, she is meeting with supporters and explaining her platform. And it's an opportunity to recall her difficult beginnings.
وهناك تحدي عشائري على المرأة. يعني هناك الكثير لا يؤمن بالمرأة أنه تكون مساوية له. يعني ملف أنه أحمل ملف فكرة المساواة بين الجنسين أيضا كان صعب.
There are still challenges today, though, and even some pushback. This candidate has just been told some of her campaign posters have been vandalized.
8 من 28 لوحة 20 ممزقة وش قد مسروقة؟
هذه الصور مالتي اللي مزقوها بالشارع.
According to Rashid, even women who do get elected face systemic discrimination and attempts to keep them away from the decision-making process.
Women, they would get to the position, they would be members of the parliament. However, they are not allowed to pass the glass ceiling. They have to stop at some point where they cannot be effective and influential decision makers.
This year, many of the women running for office hope to pass a domestic violence law. It would introduce shelters for victims and stricter punishment of so-called honor crimes, an important step for women nationwide.
And the head of the World Health Organization has apologised for clear structural failures and individual negligence in the organisation. This after allegations of sexual abuse by local and international staff deployed to fight an Ebola outbreak in the Democratic Republic of Congo between 2018 and 2020. Investigators having interviewed dozens of women who were offered work in exchange for sex or were victims of rape. In other news, residents in the European microstate of San Marino have voted overwhelmingly to legalise abortion. The move will overturn a law dating back to 1865, which made San Marino one of the last countries in Europe where abortion is completely banned. Fraser Jackson takes a look at the state of reproductive rights in Europe.
43 years after neighbouring Italy legalised abortion, the highly Catholic enclave of San Marino followed suit. The last European country to approve reproductive rights before that was Ireland in 2018, another nation with a strong Catholic tradition. Now, only 3 European countries still outlaw abortion: Malta, Andorra and the Vatican. 2 other microstates limited to life-threatening cases for pregnant women or pregnancy resulting from sexual assault, those being Monaco and Liechtenstein. But even in countries where abortions are legal, barriers restrict access for some women.
In France, we still have work to do. We need to make sure abortion is easily accessible everywhere, which isn't currently the case. Some women have to travel far or go to doctors in the city, which can be too expensive. And there aren't enough doctors who carry out abortions.
Elsewhere in Europe, reproductive rights are being put under pressure from lobbying groups. Poland's conservative government has banned abortion on the grounds of fetal abnormality, effectively eliminating the reason 97% of abortions were carried out there in 2017. It is now only available in cases of rape or danger to the mother's life.
Now, earlier this year, the French Parliament once again delayed public debate on a controversial bill which proposes to extend the legal deadline for abortion from 12 to 14 weeks. A report by the Parliamentary Delegation for Women's Rights found that every year between 3,000 to 5,000 women in France are forced to go abroad to get an abortion because they have exceeded the legal deadline. Marianne Niosi is the Director of French Family Planning and joins me in the studio. Marianne, thank you so much for your time. First of all, why is the Parliament holding off debate on this bill? Is it a case of just perennially kicking the can down the road because they don't want to address what is regarded as a hot potato issue?
Well, it's definitely a political issue because the French largely agree with the extension of the delay for abortion. We did a poll. We have 9 French people out of 10 agreeing with this measure. What's also clear is that among the deputies, a lot of them agree. So we think that if it was to be voted, it would pass. So what's going on there is a more complex issue than simply not having the support for it or...
So what is the more complex issue?
Well, there's a small but very influential minority among political elites that strongly opposes abortion and the extension of abortion rights. We saw this when, in France, laws go from the National Assembly, deputies to the Senate, back to the deputies. And when it was reintroduced to the deputies, so for a second time, the party of the right, so les Républicains, introduced a lot of amendments to stop the law from going forward. So this was clearly something that would stop. Now, what's going on now is that the government could reintroduce the law to the deputies, but is not doing so. And that's what we're waiting for. And that's why we're wondering what is going on at the level of La République En Marche. Is it at the level of the party? We think not, because we know that the president of the party has expressed support for the law. So it's at the level of the president of the Republic, Emmanuel Macron.
Okay, which brings me to my next question. Where does President Macron stand, given that his party, the ruling party, is, as you say, many of the members are supportive of this extension?
Well, Emmanuel Macron has made the fight for women's rights and against violence against women a main issue of his mandate. But he really, it was a slap in the face when he announced a few weeks ago that he did not believe in the extension of the delay for abortion from 12 to 14 weeks. He had a very conservative rhetoric on the topic. He cited doctors, but he also cited a very typically a right-wing and anti-abortion rhetoric of believing that abortion is a form of suffering for all women. Which led him to say that he wanted more prevention of abortions than anything that would lead to more access or more extent.
And is the fact that we're now heading into a presidential election campaign next year also a factor in all of this?
It's not helping. It's not helping. We know that from the beginning of his mandate, Emmanuel Macron made very clear signals to the most conservative parts of society with a very clear discourse towards the church. The fight for the presidential elections being played a lot on the right of the political spectrum. We think that this might be something that is stopping him from taking a firm stand on abortion as a fundamental right.
The view of France from outside the country is that this nation is one that very much celebrates and supports liberal and progressive values. But when you look at the delay on this vote and the fact that it's only June this year that access to IVF was granted to single women and lesbian couples, it paints a different picture, doesn't it, Marianne?
It really does. I mean, I know that your viewership is from all around the world, and so I don't want to be disrespectful. And we know the situation in so many countries, and first and foremost, what's going on in the United States. We have quite a positive situation in terms of reimbursement. French women don't pay for abortion. in terms of the possibility for young women to have abortions without their parents being in the know, with just the help of another over 18 person, not a parent. So there are quite a few things that are interesting in our law. What is not so clear is that we cannot rely on our government to keep advancing this law. We need to keep putting pressure, because what we see is that access is not so easy. What we see is that there are a lot of little measures that kind of keep women from accessing. And we have a broad situation in France where access to doctors is not so easy, and access to doctors who perform abortions is even harder.
How does France compare, however, to other European nations?
Well, in terms of abortion, we compare rather favorably, except when you look at the delay. When you look at the delay, we really are not doing that well. The UK has a very long delay of 24 weeks. The Dutch have a 24-week delay, 22-week delay. The Spanish have a 24-week delay. In terms of fighting for women's rights, we don't do that well either. For instance, the Spanish government spends 3 times more money on fighting against the violence against women. So there is a lot more that can be done. We now have the French presidency of the EU that is starting in January, and what we want is for women's rights, in particular, including reproductive rights, to be recognized as essential rights. We also, if I step out of the political debate, we think we need to have a societal debate on what it means for women to have pleasure and to have a sexual life and to have autonomy over their existence.
Marianne Niosi, it's been lovely speaking to you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And that's it for now. You can also connect with us via our Facebook page, that of course being France24.51%, or do send us a tweet at _51%. So until our next show, bye for now.